Greetings, everyone. The U.S. Navy has opened fire on the Azan ship, declaring to destroy all bridges and power plants in Azan. Ladies and gentlemen, is this the moment of collapse for an empire? The Middle East is facing an unprecedented firestorm. With only hours left before the ceasefire expires, the world holds its breath, watching every move of the U.S. Navy and the strong statements coming from Washington. The Middle East has again fallen into turmoil. Let's take a look at the dramatic escalations that just took place this past Saturday. The ceasefire agreement between Lebanon and Israel seems to be on the verge of collapse. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps decided to close the Strait of Hormuz completely just hours after it had been reopened. Then, they themselves began targeting civilian ships right after granting them permission to pass through this strategic waterway. It was during those tense moments that President Trump began convening an emergency meeting in the Situation Room, which we will learn more about in detail shortly. Just a few hours earlier, on Sunday afternoon, President Trump solemnly announced that the United States had officially taken control of a cargo ship attempting to break the American blockade. In a forceful statement, he emphasized that today, a cargo ship flying the Azan flag named Chusha, nearly 900 feet long and weighing as much as an aircraft carrier, recklessly attempted to break through our naval blockade, and the outcome for them was truly disastrous. The U.S. Navy-guided missile destroyer named U.S. Grants intercepted the Chusha in the Gulf of Oman and issued a final, fair warning to stop. However, the Azan crew rejected all reasonable warnings, and our Navy immediately stopped the ship by firing and blowing a large hole in the engine room. Currently, U.S. Marines have officially taken control of the ship. The Chusha ship was already on the U.S. Treasury Department's sanctions list due to illegal activities in the past. We now have full control of the ship and are conducting a thorough search of its contents. The warning messages were broadcast with great urgency. Cargo ship, leave the engine room immediately. Leave the engine room immediately. We are ready to open fire to neutralize you. After the initial warning shots, things have now become much more serious and consequential. This is certainly a shocking event. So far, CENTCOM has reported that about 24 ships have tried to escape the blockade from Iranian ports. When the U.S. Navy issued a warning, most of the ships decided to return to Iranian ports, meaning they had not actually crossed the red line. This Chusha ship was different. It didn't try to escape, but instead attempted to re-enter Iranian waters. Take a look at this map. This is where the dramatic collision took place. As you can see, the ship is heading straight into Iranian waters. In fact, it was on a journey from Port Klang in Malaysia, carrying a large amount of cargo to be delivered to a port in Iran. That's why the U.S. Navy issued a warning, and when the other side didn't comply, they intercepted and boarded the ship. At this point, we need to clarify an important piece of information. If a ship or an oil tanker is empty, the U.S. will allow it to enter Iranian waters. But if that ship is fully loaded with goods, it will immediately be subject to a blockade. That means no ship is allowed to enter Iranian ports if it's carrying oil or goods, and no ship can leave in the same condition. The blockade continues to tighten, and I'm sure the Iranians are extremely angry. Just look at what they declared yesterday. A powerful statement came from an influential figure inside Iran. That was their chief negotiator. He just gave his first television interview amid the chaos engulfing the country. In that interview, he warned that war could break out again at any moment. This is definitely not what you want to hear from a chief negotiator. However, this could also just be rhetoric because, as you know, there are many different factions within Iran fiercely fighting for power. Giving a television interview during the ongoing power struggle is mainly to reinforce his own position. A bit of background information about this person. He has run for the presidency of Iran several times but has failed miserably each time. Many experts have speculated that for decades, his biggest dream has been to become the supreme leader of Iran. And now, with his rivals who stood in his way gone because of the ongoing conflict, this is a golden opportunity for him to seize control. In a way, this could be a positive sign for those who hope for peace in Iran. Because to consolidate his power, he needs to negotiate a peace agreement with the United States. If successful, he will have a higher chance to rise as a new center of power in Iran. Of course, Iran still has a sitting president, but right now no one knows where that man is. We know he is still alive through a few scattered interviews, but he holds no real power at all. He does not participate in negotiations, has no say with the ISGC or the military about how to handle the current situation. Basically, that president is just a powerless puppet. That is why, for Ghalibaf, this is the ideal chance to strengthen his power and affirm his leadership in Iran. Of course, only second to the supreme leader, because the supreme leader is still a dictatorial figure that no one can surpass or control. However, aside from that position, Ghalibaf could become the next powerful figure if he successfully negotiates a peace agreement. But unfortunately, the likelihood of a peace agreement appearing in the near future is becoming lower with each passing day. Check out President Trump's statement from this morning. He said that Iran decided to open fire yesterday in the Strait of Hormuz, a blatant violation of our ceasefire agreement. Multiple shots were fired at a friendly ship and a cargo vessel from the United Kingdom. That's not good at all, is it? My representatives are on their way to Islamabad, Pakistan, and will arrive by tomorrow evening to begin negotiations. Iran has just announced the closure of the strait. It's strange because our blockade had already accomplished that. They're unintentionally helping us without even realizing it, and they're the ones suffering heavy losses, losing $500 million a day due to the closure of the strait. The United States loses nothing. In fact, many ships are now heading to Texas, Louisiana, and Alaska to receive oil. This is a response to the ISGC, those who always want to act tough. We are offering a very fair and reasonable deal, and I hope Iran will accept it, because if not, the United States will destroy every power plant and every bridge in Iran. There will be no more kindness. Everything will collapse quickly and easily if they reject this deal. It will be my honor to do what needs to be done with Iran, something that other presidents have not dared to do for the past 47 years. It's time for the Iranian killing machine to come to an end. In a moment, we will go into the details of the peace agreement that the United States is proposing. But first, I want to show you a statement from the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Wands. This morning, he clarified the U.S. plan to escalate this conflict if Iran does not agree to the peace deal. Listen carefully, because the ceasefire agreement between the United States and Iran is set to expire next Wednesday. President Trump issued a strong warning in his statement this morning that if no agreement is signed, the United States will destroy every power plant and every bridge across Iran. There will be no more kindness or concessions here. If the deadline next Wednesday passes without results, will the president extend the ceasefire order? The final answer still lies in the hands of the president, and we certainly cannot negotiate this on national television. But the question is that possibility still being considered? Absolutely yes. All options are on the table, and the president has made it clear that he is willing to escalate in order to force the other side to de-escalate the conflict. That is a necessary and decisive move, and it also aims to get ahead of the ridiculous and irresponsible rhetoric from some politicians and international media who claim that this action could constitute a war crime. That is a mistaken and provocative statement. We have a long history of neutralizing bridges, power plants, and infrastructure facilities that serve Iran's military apparatus. Meanwhile, it is Iran that frequently mixes military equipment into civilian areas, hiding weapons, missiles, and military devices in schools, hospitals, and residential neighborhoods. This is a blatant violation of international law by Iran. We need to immediately put an end to such distortions. We must keep in mind that Iran only agreed to sign the ceasefire agreement when the United States threatened to wipe out their power plants and vital bridges, facilities that would take decades to rebuild. That was when they were truly ready to come to the negotiating table. However, unfortunately, Iran's internal situation has changed a lot. Hardliners are gaining ground after the foreign minister's statement. Rumors suggest he may have lost power following his comments on reopening the Strait of Hormuz. This means that those who were willing to negotiate 2 weeks ago are now probably fearful of the rise of the military and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. They have seen the fate of the foreign minister after he tried to reach a fair agreement. Sources close to the matter have just confirmed that President Trump made it very clear. If Iran does not sign this agreement, their entire country will face destruction. Bridges and power plants will be the top targets. Two U.S. special envoys, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, are on their way to Islamabad, Pakistan for important meetings on Tuesday, which may extend into Wednesday, in an effort to finalize this agreement. The president emphasized to the media that this is an extremely simple agreement, but it is also the last chance for the Iranian people. He affirmed that he would not repeat the mistakes of the past by pouring money into Iran and allowing them to continue their nuclear program. The agreement requires reopening the Strait of Hormuz and ensuring that Iran no longer possesses highly enriched uranium, which was buried deep underground after Operation Midnight Hammer last summer. While diplomatic efforts are being pursued, the U.S. military continues to move more weapons and ammunition into the region. A massive airlift operation has been ongoing for the past 2 weeks, with transport aircraft delivering supplies every day. In addition, 3 supercarriers, the USS Abraham Lincoln, USS 04, and USS George H.W. Boots, are expected to soon converge in this area. Notably, when the war started, the United States had just 2 aircraft carriers here. If the war resumes when the ceasefire expires in the next 72 hours, it means that the United States will possess more firepower in the Middle East than ever before, even surpassing the level at the start of the war in February. The purpose of mobilizing this massive military strength is to create more options for the United States in case the negotiations do not go as planned. In Pakistan, later tonight, U.S. time, if everything goes smoothly, there is a high possibility that the ceasefire will be extended. This is the scenario that many experts believe is the most likely to happen, unless Iran takes actions that are so reckless they cannot be salvaged. Initially, there were security concerns that prevented Vice President Z.D. Vance from participating, but the White House quickly changed the plan. Now, Z.D. Vance will personally lead the delegation of experts to Pakistan, along with special envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. The presence of Vice President Z.D. Vance is a particularly important and positive signal. The Iranians see him as someone they can talk to and trust, since there is no history of tense negotiations between them in the past. This is in stark contrast to Jared Kushner or Steve Witkoff, who have previously clashed with the Iranian government before the war broke out, causing a significant loss of trust. However, the messages coming from Tehran are extremely chaotic and confusing. While the United States is ready, Iranian state media has announced that they have not yet made any decision about sending a negotiation team to Pakistan. The Iranians have also loudly declared that they will not enter negotiations as long as the naval blockade remains in place. But be careful, this could very well just be a deceptive act. Why do I say that? Because right before the most recent negotiations, the Speaker of the Iranian parliament publicly affirmed that he would participate in the talks unless there was a ceasefire in Lebanon. But guess what happened? There was no ceasefire in Lebanon until the end of last week. Yet the Iranian delegation quietly went to the meeting in Pakistan. Iran has always had a habit of spreading misinformation and skillfully covering up the truth. Another important point to remember is that the state news agency Tadnim previously loudly declared that right after the American F-15 was shot down, Iran had captured the pilot. But what is the harsh truth? The United States successfully rescued both soldiers who were trapped inside Iranian territory. That's another powerful example showing that this state media is blatantly deceiving the public. Therefore, the likelihood that this statement is yet another lie is extremely high. We will know for sure whether Iran is putting on a show if the U.S. Vice President boards the plane to Pakistan on Sunday night. Because if he actually takes off, there must definitely be some behind-the-scenes commitments from Iran to confirm that they will attend the meeting. Otherwise, a U.S. Vice President would never fly halfway around the world just to face rejection. I completely believe that. If Sudabaz boards the plane, we'll know Iran is coming. If not, all negotiations are considered over. Remember, it takes about 16 hours to fly from the United States to Pakistan. That means if the Vice President doesn't depart on Sunday night, the meeting can't take place before the ceasefire expires. And that would be extremely bad news for Iran, because they are really suffering under the pressure of the blockade. In fact, their exhaustion is much more severe than we imagine. If war breaks out again while the blockade is still tight, I believe Iran could actually collapse and fall apart like the Soviet Union did in the past. Let's review the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs statement issued Sunday morning. It reveals to some extent the level of devastation this blockade is causing. They call the so-called blockade of Iranian ports and coasts by the United States not only a violation of the ceasefire agreement brokered by Pakistan, but also an illegal act and a crime. It's ridiculous that just 2 days ago, the Speaker of the Iranian parliament declared that the U.S. blockade had completely failed and that Iranian ships were still coming and going freely as they pleased. Yet now, their Ministry of Foreign Affairs has to cry out that what the United States is doing is a crime. If this blockade was truly ineffective, I'm sure Iran would never have to make such desperate statements. Anyway, I'll let you judge for yourself whether Iran is really in trouble or not. But please don't forget that it was Iran who actually initiated this blockade. They were the ones who attacked civilian ships in the Strait of Hormuz, while blatantly allowing their own ships to pass freely in order to reap huge profits. And now the U.S. Navy is simply restoring fairness. If Iran blocks civilian ships from other Gulf countries, then the United States will block everything coming out of Iran. That way, no country can send out its ships unless everyone is allowed to do the same. This is the message the United States sent at the campaign's start. If Iran really wants to end this suffocation, all they need to do is reopen the Strait of Hormuz. By the way, speaking of this issue, the same person who is talking about crimes against humanity once admitted on television that Iran killed tens of thousands of protesters during the riots in January. That is the height of hypocrisy called Iran. When leading human rights organizations like Amnesty International accuse the government of carrying out massacres of protesters, when they claim to have reviewed verified footage and eyewitness accounts of security forces deploying on the streets and rooftops, including residential houses, mosques, and police posts, continuously firing at protesters, often aiming directly at their heads and chests. When Amnesty, an organization that isn't particularly sympathetic to the U.S. or Israeli governments, presents such solid evidence, why should we believe the government instead of them? The Iranian side responded evasively, claiming that the evidence and videos were all provided by Israel and the United States. But the reality is that Israel has even harshly criticized Amnesty, just like Iran has. These denials are painful to hear, no different from the statements denying what happened in Gaza. These are the accounts of witnesses, reports from doctors, and actual footage. When cornered, the Iranian side tries to forcefully compare their piece to Gaza. But the truth is, we are looking at how a government denies the truth in front of independent human rights organizations. The Iranian side stubbornly claims that their government has been transparent by publishing the list of those killed and declaring that among them, 2,400 people were considered to have died from gunshots fired by unknown gunmen. Or they were just police officers and innocent bystanders. They admit that 600 people are considered intruders or gunmen. But human rights monitoring organizations, Amnesty International, and numerous media outlets have not acknowledged that. Are all those witnesses really lying? In your opinion, will the U.S. naval blockade force Iran to submit at the negotiating table? Or will it be the spark that ignites an uncontrollable major war in the Middle East? If a peace agreement is not signed, do you believe President Trump will actually order the destruction of Iran's infrastructure?